Hello! Welcome to Levels Plus Weekly, episode 60. Today is a special day. It happens to be the 21st birthday of this entire Levels Plus enterprise. So we'll have a little acknowledgement of that. But the key point of interest today is going to be my dual life perspective for the first half of 2022. But before we get into all of that, let's do the little anniversary discussion, huh? But today, as mentioned at the top, is Levels Plus's 21st birthday. August 6th, 2001 is when I opened up Wildcat Online, which was my very first attempt at doing anything on the internet. And it evolved into Level, and then into Levels, and then into Levels Plus. So it's had quite the journey. Started as a tripod site, was on there until 2009, so 8 years of its history. So it's been on WordPress for quite a while. And it's been quite a delightful little journey going from that point to this point in my life. And it felt like, since the dual life perspective video happens to have fallen on this particular recording, it just felt like an appropriate time to just kind of bring that all together with the site anniversary, which is why the video is going up a little earlier than normal. But yeah, I'm really pleased with my work on this exercise, especially since it's been on WordPress. I moved away from the early days of the site where it was definitely one of an 18-year-old. So now there's a lot of stuff on Levels Plus that I'm really proud of, to the point that I made a book about it, of course, The Best of Levels Plus, Volume 1. Is on Amazon. It's my most recent book as of right now. I'm still plugging away on the cover for my next book. And I do have some exciting news on the Femtendo front, that I was finally able to get all of the Japanese carts that I need for 1987. I just have one American cart I have to find, which is fairly common, so it shouldn't be too hard, but it's just really awesome news to finally say, yes, I have all the materials to my knowledge for the book. One last note before we jump into the dual life perspective is this song is actually from 2001 as well. I hope, since the dual life perspective is going to not have any music for it, because I'm going to be playing little video clips in the background, I thought it would be nice to just have a nice little homage to my history. Before we get into that, let's have a little special guest situation, because it's also Flavi's birthday today. So we'll have her have a few comments about site anniversary and her birthday. Two 2022. It's been a year. Been a lot of transition, a lot of changes, and just a lot of feelings, emotions. COVID is still very much a thing, but it really feels like the world at large wants to pretend that it isn't, and it's kind of obnoxious and dangerous for that mentality to really be prevalent. I've had to work in the office for the entire year, pretty much, and just watching the safety factor just diminish among people, it's disappointing. There's not much I can do about it. I still wear a mask when I'm in public. I will say that it has definitely reduced my getting sick for long periods of time by keeping up the mask routine and all of that. But it is a bit just disheartening how quickly people just abandon that, because there's so many people who are still getting affected by COVID. So many people have caught COVID, and we still don't fully know what it does. And, it's just an odd situation that I don't really have a great answer for, beyond just continuing to protect myself as best as I can. Work has been tumultuous, to put it best, because it was just really difficult to feel like I had a voice, or like my input was being valued. And unfortunately, it doesn't pay super great. But there was some changes within the office. Some new people are coming in, or have come in, that have basically changed the dynamic of the office and have made it a lot more enjoyable to be around. And I feel like in the last couple months that that I'm being listened to, I'm being acknowledged, I'm being appreciated in a way that I wasn't for a very long time. And that's really nice. That actually has helped quite a bit. And then the union had got a new contract in place, so there's a bonus coming, there's a raise coming, so the pay is going to get a little bit better. But the inflation component of what's going on in the United States has been really, really crappy. Gas going up $2 to $3 a gallon is ludicrous. Food has been going up, and they've been reducing package sizes as well. So that's not good. Some of my bills have gone up. Rents gone up. My water bill has seemingly doubled the last 2 months, and I don't know why. I actually inquired about that. There's a possibility my student loans are coming back in. It's just, it's despite the improvements to the office dynamic and my morale getting better, there's still the pay problem. And one of the things I want to do is I want to market my books more, because they're awesome. I have so much pride in them. It's just I'm not a marketing person. I've never really liked throwing myself out there, I guess. So I'm trying to work on that, but it's difficult with other things going on, especially with job, working on other books. It's definitely more fun than the marketing piece. So I'm trying to figure out all that stuff for myself, and I'm getting some progress done, but it's still a bit of a struggle. Mental and emotional health has been okay to good, depending on what's going on. There's been some very stressful stuff this year. There's been fires near my parents' house in the last month. That was really stressful. There was some cat health stuff with Flavia getting injured. That was really stressful, and that was also last month. July was not a good month. There's some other things that have happened that I don't really want to get into on here. But on the whole, it's been alright. One thing that is upcoming that's going to be helpful is getting into working from home a little bit more. So I do have a little bit of a break from being around people all the time. As an empath, I just take in so much from what everybody else is feeling, and it's a lot, and it just would be good to have some time to decompress outside of the office, outside of my weekend. So it'll be nice to have that change come in. Oh, what else? Artistically, I've gotten some art done that I'm really proud of. I'm working on Isolate. I'm working on a So This webcomic book. Um, so it's been good getting some of that stuff going. And then the Levels Plus book was really awesome on a creativity front on a different level. So that was fun. Um, Friends are going well. I've made some new friends that I'm really stoked to have in my life. I'm cherishing the really strong friendships that I've had, um, especially with my best friend, who just continues to be such a incredible beacon of support and warrior of light. I appreciate you so much. Anyway, let's move into the virtual half because I can't think of anything else off the top of my head beyond thanking the people that really matter to me for being there and thanking you, of course, for listening to me talk about my personal life. So let's switch gears. All right, let's start off in January, and I was feeling the King of Fighters hype, so I was playing through a bunch of SNK fighters, including King of Fighters 2002, which I think is the better of the two Dream Match games we have so far from SNK, and definitely one of EOList's best titles when they were handling the development duties. I think this is a really solid game, and I put it as number 3, I think, on my list of King of Fighters games, behind 11 and KOF Evolution, aka 99. And 99 is higher than this only because I have nostalgia for it, because it was my first King of Fighters game. But in terms of the roster, in terms of the gameplay, and just everything coming together, I think this is probably the one that you should consider starting with for the old Neo Geo King of Fighters games, because it's just traditional enough. It's got a huge roster that has most of the characters from the Orochi Saga and the Ness Saga at that point. So I think it's just the way to go, honestly. I also played through KOF 2000, which I don't like as much as 99. And I don't really know why. It feels a little off in contrast to 99 to me. Like a little bit stiffer. I think it also relies on the striker system more than 99 does, because 99 introduced the concept, but it didn't feel like it was an essential piece of the game. But in contrast, it definitely does feel a little more crucial to 2000's overall gameplay. It's cute, some of the cameos that they've tossed in. I think that's pretty cool that they did that. But on the whole, I think 99 just has a better presentation and a better gameplay feel. So I put 2000, I think, at number 5, under 98. And here we are with the greatest of SNK's efforts in the fighting genre, Garrow, Mark of the Wolves. Just a beautiful game all the way around. And this time around, I played as Hotaru for the first time through the arcade mode, and had an absolute blast learning how she worked. I usually play as Rock when I play this game. But in terms of what the Neo Geo hardware could do, this, along with like the Last Blade series, just really captures the passion of SNK sprite artists. It captures the strongest overall gameplay feel in any Neo Geo fighting game, in my opinion. And it rivals Street Fighter 3 Third Strike in terms of just deciding to do something really dynamic and different and adding in some of the most impressive visuals and audio and gameplay and character designs. Just deciding that, you know what, it's okay to reinvent the wheel. It's okay to dial back the characters that people know and try a whole bunch of new ones. In this case, SNK took that a step further with only having Terry come back. There's a couple characters that are homages to prior characters. So, like Kim Jae-hoon, for example, is Kim Kapwan's son from the earlier games. But this game is just amazing. It's one of my favorite fighting games of all time, and just deserves all the praise in the world for being SNK's greatest effort in the genre. So February was a kind of a light month. I only got around to beating Alien Storm for the arcade when I pulled up the good old Astro City Mini. And I quite like this game. I think it's a pretty clever take on the beat 'em up because it's a little bit different because you have a gun all the time. But it still works like a beat 'em up in terms of your combo strings. And it's just different. Like, it's got a sense of humor around it. It's kind of goofy. But at the same time, it has like this grotesque element with the alien designs that I think are really good. And like, it has a lot of interesting mechanics going on with it that you can run and attack. You've got like high impact attacks, but you also have strings. And the thing about Alien Storm that I think really makes it stand out is that it has these first-person segments, which should be popping up here shortly. But I'll go ahead and skip ahead a little bit into the video so we can see what those look like. These sections, which are just really unique because it just completely changes the gameplay perspective. And it's really, really well done. I mean, it's not a light gun game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still fun to play these modes. It's a nice change of pace. You get really good moments of getting bonus energy, and then there's also these segments where you are basically into a shoot 'em up of sorts, where you're running. So it turns it into like a horizontal shoot 'em up of sorts. So this game just has a lot of cool stuff going on with it, and it mixes things up enough that it breaks up any semblance of monotony just enough to make this game really compelling and fun. So I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't played Alien Storm before. While I was in the Astro City Mini, I also gave Golden Axe Revenge of Death Adder a go. And this is one of the best beat-em-ups ever made. And that's really saying something because I don't like the old Golden Axe games at all. But this one just does everything right. It really does. It's got 4 characters that are all very different from each other. It has very good visuals, very interesting and dynamic gameplay. Like, you can ride these creatures, you've got weapons you can pick up as well, and then your own fighting abilities are far greater than any of the other Golden Axe games. It's just a beautiful looking game too. Like, it's just really stunning looking to play, and it maintains the traditional Golden Axe formula. Like, you beat up elves to get magic, you collect more magic stuff in order to build up that meter for super moves, but you just have so much more gameplay mechanics at work here that makes this game just so much more effective than the older ones. Add in a 2-player mode, which I did not get a chance to try out, but this is just really good. It's definitely, in my opinion, close to rivaling Streets of Rage in terms of Sega's best work in the genre. And that says a lot because I think really highly of Streets of Rage 2 and Streets of Rage 4. So, if you have the Astro City Mini and you haven't gotten around to trying Golden Axe Revenge of Death Adder yet, you really should take it upon yourself to give it a shot. PacMan Champion Edition was demaked on the NES by an enterprising fan, and Bandai Namco deemed it worth including on their Namco Museum Archives compilations. So I played it on that, and it's good. I really like the Champion Edition games as is. I thought that the original Championship Edition, the title for this is so long, was spectacular, and this is basically just a slightly simpler version of that, but it captures what I enjoyed about that game a lot. Just, you don't have some of the elements that you have in the normal Championship Edition, like bombs, if I remember right. You don't have those at all in this. And it doesn't have a lot of the same modes, and it's a lot more limited in terms of what it presents to the table. But on the whole, this is still a really good version of this game, and it's worth playing if you haven't played any of these before. And honestly, all three of the Championship Edition games are really worth checking out, in my opinion, including 2. 2 is definitely making some big shifts in contrast, but it's still fun. Castlevania, one of my favorite NES games. One of Konami's strongest efforts on the console, and that's saying a lot because they had a lot of strong efforts on the NES and Famicom. But I love this game. It's one of my favorites in the series to this day. I just feel like it's just superb gameplay, incredible visuals for 1987, I believe is when it came out. In America, at least. I think it was late 86. Yeah, it was late 86 in Japan. And it's just a great game. I've actually gotten good enough at this point that I can make it to the end of the game without resetting a whole bunch. I do kind of cheat the system a little bit by playing it on Anniversary Collection, which has the rewind and save stating. Or at least save stating. I can't remember if Anniversary Collection is rewind or not. But this is just such a good game. I adore it to pieces, and I'm so thrilled to be able to have it on modern systems in a multitude of ways at this point, because it's on the NES Mini, it's on the Anniversary Collection. While on the topic of Castlevania Anniversary Collection, I did get my limited run Ultimate Edition. It's lovely, and I'll be covering it next week as part of the collection video. I got my Egret 2 Mini in March, because that's where we are now. And, of course, the very first thing I had to play on it was Elevator Action Returns, my absolute favorite arcade game of all time. It's in my top 10, I believe, now. I think I moved it into the top 10 because it's so good. It's such a splendid game. Visually stunning. Incredible jazzy soundtrack that works perfectly for what's going on. Gameplay that is incredibly responsive and fun and varied. Each level does something just a little bit different. And while it can get a little annoying dealing with the elevators coming up and down and having to wait for them to actually work for you, I don't care, because when the game feels as good as this one does to play, it doesn't matter if you have to wait around a little bit, because it feels good playing it. So I absolutely adore this game. I'm just so happy that it's got a way to be played in 2022 without emulation and not having to go back to the Taito Legends 2 port, which is adequate. It's good, but it's not perfect. It doesn't have the machine gun, for example, and it has more slowdown problems than the original arcade game does. But this is just such a great game. I just love it so much. And the really cool thing, although it's not the optimized way of playing it, is that there is the really, really amazing fact that the Saturn port, which was the only home port of the game when it originally came out, is coming to the Switch soon. And I hope that they do it justice, because from what I understand, Elevator Action Returns on the Saturn is a pretty solid port. But it's not perfect, but it's pretty solid. So I love this game. I'm so glad that I can play it on something on a modern TV. I highly recommend checking it out however you can. So please, please, please try out Elevator Action Returns. It's an absolute goddamn legend. Kaiser Knuckles' second revision, Dan Coogan, I think is what it's called. We're going to see a little bit of the desperation super moves that appear in the game as my background footage. But this is a perfectly fine fighter that won't rock your socks too much, but it looks good. I mean, Taito's sprite artist put in a lot of good effort. There's a lot of cute touches. It plays well enough, especially this revision. I don't recommend actually playing Kaiser Knuckle because it's not that great. In contrast to this, because they did a lot of gameplay refinements and added in some more special moves for characters. So this just feels like a better game. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I even got through the really difficult, annoying boss, the general, and put up with his garbage. Thankfully, I save stated because that was the only way I was going to do it. All right, as we moved into April, because the 3DS eShop was limiting access, I decided that without an Ace Attorney Collection 2 being announced yet, that it was time to pick up the 3DS Phoenix Wright games, and I decided to play through them both. So I got through Dual Destinies first, and I think Dual Destinies is really good. It's not my favorite of the two, but I think that it was solid. It brought back Apollo, it brought back Phoenix, so they both have their own plot arcs, which I think is great. Athena is a wonderful new character. I love her. I think she's definitely one of the best characters they've introduced in these later games. Really my only critique that I have of Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice, which I'll get to in a bit, is I feel like Trucy, who was such an important part of Apollo Justice, kind of just got pushed aside in these games because there's so many attorneys now that they're supporting the other attorneys. So characters like Maya and Trucy just kind of are now like tertiary. It's kind of a bummer, really, because I really liked Trucy and Apollo's dynamic in Apollo Justice, and it never quite gets back there because the game just can't allow that to happen. And Trucy keeps getting into Maya's situations as well, which is kind of a bummer. I wasn't the biggest fan of Bobby in terms of a detective. I was really glad that they brought Emma back in Spirit of Justice. But, and there's a couple characterizations in Dual Destinies that I am not a fan of, that are very questionable. But I feel like this game did a lot to kind of evolve the series forward, and I feel like Spirit does a little bit of a better job, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But ultimately, I think Dual Destinies was a good entry in the series. I would probably put it at number 4 out of the 6 mainline games. Behind, in my opinion, Apollo Justice, then probably Spirit of Justice, and then I would probably put the original Phoenix Wright as number 3. And then it would probably be Trials and Tribulations as 5 and Justice for All as 6. I still think they're all good, but ultimately I feel like this one is not as good as others. Well, the last Egret 2 mini game made it onto the 2022 first half list, and that is Pirate Pete. This is also known as Jungle Hunt or Jungle King, depending. Taito actually did this game 3 times with different sprites. Pirate Pete is the most drastic change to the gameplay, because Jungle Hunt and Jungle King all still have a jungle vibe to them, but Jungle King was basically a Tarzan ripoff, and Taito, I think, got a little bit of cold feet wanting to continue that association, so they changed it into a explorer type with Jungle Hunt, and then they just changed it entirely to Pirate Pete. But it's basically the same game all the way around. And I had some nostalgia for this game because I had Jungle Hunt on my Commodore 64. And while this is not extraordinarily a great game by any stretch of the imagination, it's fine. I think it's fun. Probably the weakest game I've played so far this year, though, I will say that. Alright. So, as I was talking about a little bit ago, Spirit of Justice ended up being my second favorite game in the series. And I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think that having the second court system was really fascinating. I liked the change. I thought that the new characters that they introduced in this game were much stronger than they were in Dual Destinies. You still get Apollo and you still get Athena. They have their own cases, and then they all come together. And ultimately, I just feel like this is a far more intriguing game because it deals with cultural differences. It talks about how government can be corrupt in really interesting ways. It brings Maya back, which I think was really good. Of course, she goes through the same motions that she always does, so it's not as good as it could be, but I guess it's on point with being traditional. But yeah, I just think the Spirit of Justice just nailed everything really well. And I think that our prosecutor here is a really fascinating figure. Because he's a bit of a contradiction in himself, because he's purportedly peaceful, but at the same time he has so much resentment and hate that it's a really interesting storyline, and it brings Apollo's story to an interesting conclusion as well. So ultimately, I think that Spirit of Justice is the second best in the series. I still need to get through the DLC case, but on the whole, I really like it. I think it's really, really good. Alright, Fire Emblem Awakening. My third favorite Fire Emblem game, I think, is where I have it now. I think Echoes is a little bit better, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a nod when I redo my top 111, which is another August thing I want to try to do. But I think Awakening is a very strong entry in the series in terms of gameplay, mechanics. I like the character designs. I think the character personalities have definitely gotten better with Three Houses. There's some very basic characters in this game, as well as some that are just outright offensive. I watched Keita Nash Gaming play through the entire game with her husband on Twitch. And she got every support for everyone that you possibly can. And so seeing every support really kind of changed my opinion on some of these characters. Some positive and some negative. I do think that there are characters that I liked the first time I played the game a few years ago that I don't like now because of their supports. And there's characters that I didn't get an opportunity to try out that I did on my second run that I actually like. So I still think Fire Emblem Awakening is a very good game, but it's definitely been outclassed by Three Houses as the definitive example of this series. And I think in hindsight, the writing is probably the weak point of this game, because it really does undermine some of these characters, and there's a couple that are just absolutely like, why did they write them this way? It's atrocious. All right, so in June, I got through 2 games on the Capcom Fighting Collection. Red Earth is the first, and it was the first because it was the one I was most intrigued by. It was the one that I've always wanted to play, because it just like, it's Capcom's most weird fighting game. I think it does so much of its own thing that it stands on its own in contrast to any other fighter they put out. You only have 4 playable characters that level up as you play, so it's more like a fighting game beat 'em up. It's also a boss rush. You don't fight the other 3 characters, you only fight these sequence of bosses, and they all have their own story. There's also a magic system that as you build up, you don't build up meter, you grab magic orbs to do your super moves instead. Your life doesn't completely refill at the end of a match. And it's just a really unique game, but it also is a lot of fun. I played through it as Tessa without abusing the experience system, so I played it as originally intended. And then I played it with Tessa with all of her moves unlocked, and then with Mei Ling, I think is her name, with all of her moves unlocked. And I had fun with all 3 runs. So I think that this is a marvelous game, and I'm glad that it finally got a chance to shine out of the arcades, because it's never been released before. Last but not least is Vampire Savior 2, which is a game I have not played before because it hasn't been released in America before. I played Darkstalkers 3 a few years ago. I really like the Darkstalkers games, but they're not my favorite. I still think that they are very important games for Capcom in terms of what they bring to the table. But it essentially, for me, just doesn't quite, on a gameplay perspective, there's something about the way the game feels that doesn't quite resonate with me as much as like Street Fighter or the Versus series or Red Earth even, for example, or Project Justice. The character designs are amazing, the visuals are stunning, the music's solid, the gameplay's there. There's just something about it that I don't like as much, and I can't quite put my finger on it. That's not to say they're bad. I would actually say that this game in particular is one of Capcom's best overall fighting games. It's just, there's just something about the way it feels that just doesn't quite stick the landing for me, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Alright, well, this was a chunky episode, wasn't it? It's kind of hard to condense 15 games being discussed into half an hour or less, so it ran a little long, but that's alright. I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Next week will be a very exciting one as well, because it's going to be my annual collection video, and I'm getting a whole bunch of stuff over the next week or so to build upon that. So I hope you will decide to come back and join me for another exciting episode of Levels Plus Weekly as we move into the post-60 episodes. I don't know why, it feels like episode 60 was like a really big deal. It's absolutely not, but it feels like it to me, so I'm treating it as such. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. Take care.